Hello and welcome to another video of Vidhai. Here in this video, we'll be learning about the chapter Transportation in Plants and Circulation in Animals. This is for the exam NTSE. And I am Ryan, a volunteer from Vidhai for the team Exams Vidhai, where everything is possible. Without further ado, we'll be looking into what are we going to learn in this chapter. So in this chapter, you have two different subtopics. You have the plant side of the chapter and the animal side of the chapter. In this video, we'll be focusing on the plant side of the chapter. In plants, we'll be having the means of transportation, transportation through roots, transpiration, translocation, xylem and folium, which are the tissues of the plant, and the ascent of sap. Let's look into the introduction to this chapter. All plants and animals are multicellular organisms that possess millions of cells in their body, and they need constant supply of energy. So this constant supply of energy is administered by the circulation system in animals and the transportation in plants. So what is transport? Transport means to carry things from one place to another. For in plants, we have xylem, which transports water and mineral salts to all parts of the plants, and folium, which transport food synthesized by the leaves to all parts of the plants as well. The bulk movement of substance through vascular tissue is called translocation. So this translocation is just the movement of minerals, waters and foods, and the vascular tissue here means xylem and folium. I'll show a separate slide for xylem and folium. For now, just have this as the veins of the plants. So the means of transportation in plants. Transportation of materials in and out of the cells is carried out by diffusion and active transportation. So diffusion is more or less the passive transportation. The opposite of active is passive. So what does diffusion tells us? So in this diagram, you will be having one highly concentrated area, that is in one half you have many particles here, and in the other half you have less particles here. As time moves on, both the sides will have same particles, that is from this left hand side some particles will go to the right hand side. So you can see an effective transportation of particles from the left to the right, and this is exactly diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of solid, gas or liquid from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, and it's the passive process in the plants. Now let's take a look into the opposite of diffusion. Diffusion being the passive process. Now let's look into the active process. It's called as active transportation. What's the difference between passive transportation and active transportation is, active transportation utilizes energy in the form of ATPs. So it will go in the reverse manner. So molecules will go from right hand side to left hand side here. As you can see that even though this is highly concentrated, the arrow mark is showing from a lower to higher. So the main difference between active transportation and passive transportation, that is diffusion is from higher to lower concentration, while active transportation is from lower to higher concentration. That's why active transportation is called uphill transportation. Osmosis is also a type of transportation used in plants. It's the movement of not the particles but rather the liquid dissolved with the particles. So you see that particles are not being transported. That is, you have one white color ball here, and here also you have one white color ball. Here you have four white color balls. Here you have four white color balls. Now notice the black color balls. So black color balls represent water molecules, and let's say the white color balls represent the salt molecules. Here you can see the effective transportation of the black color balls, that is the water molecules. Here in the previous two cases only the white color balls move, but here the black color ball moves in order to have the concentration same as the left and the right hand side, and this is called osmosis. and the membrane which divides these two halves is called a semi-permeable membrane. Semi-permeable membrane will only allow solvents to pass through it. Transportation through roots. So there are millions of root hairs at the tip of the root which absorb water and minerals through diffusion or sometimes active transportation. Root has a thin walled slender extension of epidermal cell that increases the surface area of absorption. Don't worry, this text is also there in the textbook, so if you want to know the definition by heart, you can always refer the textbook. So let's look into the pathway of how the water is absorbed by the roots. Note that after the water has been absorbed by the root hair cell, it goes into the root cortex cell and into the xylem vessel. Xylem vessel is one responsible for transportation of water and minerals dissolved in water mainly. So how does this water go through this root cells? There are two types of movement here: apoplast pathway and symplast pathway. In the apoplast pathway, it will go in between the spaces of the cell walls and it won't go through the cell, while a symplast pathway will just go through the cell. As you can see, a small gaps in between the cell walls, it will go through the cell. So there are two types of movement through which water has been transported like this manner. Root pressure is also a means of transporting the water. Water moves along and increases the pressure inside the xylem. In the bottom of the tree, roots are present and more number of waters acclimated into the xylem. The water at the depth of the tree will increase its pressure and thus causing the water to go up the tree. That is from roots to the leaves. Transpiration in plants. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from aerial parts of the plants, especially through stomata in leaves. Stomata is one of the aerial parts of the plant, and this is a pictorial representation of a stomata. The question will be asked like, where can you find stomata? In your earlier classes, you might have learned that stomata is found under the leaf of the plant, and that is completely correct. Under the leaf of this plant, you will find this porous tissue that is responsible for respiration of plants as well. Not only respiration, now we have also learned that it's also responsible for evaporation of water from the stomata. Water evaporates from the mesophyll cells of the leaves through the open stomata and thus causes the mesophyll cells to lower its water concentration. So from the stomata, when the water is lost, it will create a vacuum of the water space to pull the water from the roots, and this is called as transpiration pull. So we have learned that the root pressure caused by the roots will cause the water to go up, and even the transpiration pull will also cause the water to come up to the leaves. So these two factors create an upward movement of water from roots to leaves. So this is an example or an experiment where you can see transpiration in plants. You cover a plastic bag over the plant and wait for a few days or hours. After some time period, you notice small droplets of water on the bag, meaning that water has evaporated from the leaves. So transpiration pool for transport of water is created. It also supplies water for photosynthesis and also keeps the surface of the leaves cool. So this is more or less one important point, because during the summer when temperatures get hot, leaves are often dried up, and this transpiration also allows to act as the radiators of the leaves. Translocation in plants. Remember that we discussed about translocation in the first ever slide. So here we'll be looking into it in much more detail. Translocation of mineral ions are immobilized from young leaves to younger leaves. This phenomena is seen in deciduous plants. So deciduous plants are plants which shed their leaves in a certain time period. So probably in winter climate, the deciduous plants will shed their leaves, and before they shed the leaves, they will remobilize these minerals from the older leaves to the younger leaves. Elements like phosphorus, sulfur, nitrogen, and potassium are easily mobilized, while calcium are not easily remobilized. So, this is also one of the important points that may be asked in the NTSE exam. Small amounts of materials changes takes place between the phylum and folium. Takes place between the xylem and folium. Translocation of sugars. So, if you ask me the difference between mineral ions and sugars, mineral ions are more or less related to minerals dissolved in water, and sugars are the food for the plants. So, glucose is prepared at the source to convert to sucrose. Glucose is usually prepared at the leaves, and it's also converted to sucrose at the leaves as well through photosynthesis. Sucrose moves into companion cells, then into living phylum sieve tube cells by active transport. And it's also water in the adjacent xylem moves into folium through osmosis. So you have learned that the exchange takes place between xylem and folium through what? It takes place through osmosis. So this translocation is just basically the carrying of water, minerals and food through xylem and folium in the plant. So sugar from leaves goes down and water from xylem from the roots will go to the folium, and thus sugar and water dissolves and goes down to the leaves. So this is basically translocation. Translocation is often referred to the transportation of food basically, but it's also transportation of water in some subtle cases. Altogether, translocation is the movement of food from leaves to root and movement of water minerals from roots to leaves through xylem and folium respectively. Xylem and folium transportation. Xylem is the connective tissue responsible to carry water from roots to other parts of the plant. The movement is always unidirectional in xylem, that is upwards. So xylem always carries water and minerals ion dissolved in water from roots to leaves, always in the upward direction. So what about folium? Folium is the transportation for food, the leaves as the source to the sink. Since the sink and source relation can be varied, the movement can be both upwards or downwards in folium. So folium can go in bidirectional, that is from leaves to other leaves, from leaves to branches, from leaves to roots. So it's both upwards and downwards in folium. These two pictures are not given in the textbook, so I recommend you to take a closer look into this picture. So this is the stem, cross section area of the stem of a plant, and you can see these white and green pattern in the inner wall, that is xylem, and the full green one is the folium, right? And this is the supportive tissue like the backbone in our organisms, and this whole thing is called as vascular bundle. So vascular bundles are nothing but responsible for transportation of food and water. So this is how a xylem and folium looks like. Xylem is thick walled and folium is thin walled, and xylem carries water and minerals, folium carries water and food. So it's a two-way flow of sap, one-way flow of sap. So take a closer look into this picture. You can even pause this video and see for a longer time. Ascent of sap. So ascent of sap is just the upward movement of water and minerals from roots to different plants, and this is called the ascent of sap. So this is more or less the translocation of water. Translocation is more or less related to food mainly, but in some cases to water. But here ascent of sap is more or less related to water and minerals dissolved in water mainly. So there are 5 different factors that determines. So there is root pressure, capillary action, the addition cohesion of water molecules, and these two are much more defined in these other 2 points. So basically there are 4 or 3 points that is determining the ascent of sap. So this is how it goes. It will take water from the root and upwards to the stem and then to the leaves, and the leaves will transpire to create a vacuum, which also causes to make the water move upwards, and the root pressure in here will also cause the water to move upwards. Here I'm more or less breezing through because this is also given in the textbook, and all the text and even this diagram is also from the textbook, so do refer the textbook for clear definitions. So let us end this video with some 3 practice questions from the slides we have learned from. First question: active transportation involves movement of molecules from lower to higher concentration, expenditure of energy, it is an uphill task, or all of the above. The next question is: water which is absorbed by the roots is transported to aerial parts of the plants through cortex, epidermis, folium, or xylem. The third question is: during transpiration there is a loss of carbon dioxide, oxygen, water, or none of the above. Can pause this video and solve these 3 questions and then resume the video. And now I'll give the answer to these 3 questions. And the first answer is the movement of molecules from lower to higher concentration. The uphill task can also be more or less a passive transport due to the transpiration of water and the root pressure. So it's not an active transportation. Expenditure of energy is sometimes for passive as well, and it's not always the case for the active transportation, and so therefore the answer is movement of molecules from lower to higher concentration. The next answer is xylem, where xylem is responsible for carrying water. So in this question it's asking basically which is responsible for carrying water, and the answer is xylem. Cortex and epidermis are the terms we haven't learnt, and these are more or less you learn in your future classes. And the third question answer is water. So transpiration is basically the definition of loss of water. And that concludes this video of transportation in plants and circulation in animals. This video consists of the part transportation in plants, and we have taken a closer look into the transportation in plants. All the pictures are taken from textbook and Google Images. All the extracts are from textbook only. Remember to go through the glossary and points to remember. And we'll be having a part 2 of this video where we'll be learning about the circulation in animals, and it's going to be quite a big one, so sure, take a look into it. And do also please like, share and subscribe.